So we chose that song today because we're going to look at is total happiness a myth? Because I go to the bookstore, and if you go on and find the book Happiness, you're going to find, I can't tell you how many books, or go on Amazon and put in happiness, and there's books. Be totally happy, be this. And there's this whole movement toward happiness. And what I'm finding is as we have this whole movement toward happiness, there's a huge movement into depression. Well, wait a second. We've got more books than ever, more videos than ever on happiness. And yet we've got more depressed people than ever. Makes you want to think about that, doesn't it? So let's go. What do most people think happiness is? Okay? What is happiness? It's an emotional response to a perceived event. Would that not be the most simple definition you've heard for it? An emotional response to a perceived event. So most people in the world cannot be happy unless there's an event that makes them happy. Unless a person does something for them in a specific way that makes them happy. Unless they get a promotion, unless they get a bonus, unless they have a baby, unless this. And then what happens the second they get it? They're not happy. It passes just like that. I go back to when I was in the corporate world, and when I finally became assistant vice president, and I was eligible for stock options. You know those incredible things that people get, stock options? Well, I got stock options. And I called Gene. I said, it was great. I got stock options. I got this many. And it was done. There was nothing more after you got them. And the next year you got them, and so for 10 minutes you were excited. And you realize, wait a second, am I missing something here? What's not there? So I've decided to form a different definition of what it is. I think happiness is found in the satisfaction we feel when we are living a purpose-filled life. For me, this is really where I feel the happiness. And you notice satisfaction is not an exuberant emotion. It's like, I'm satisfied in my marriage. A lot of people judged me just now. What do you mean you're just satisfied? Well, I am. I'm satisfied. What does satisfied mean? Satisfied means you're seeing the highs, you're seeing the lows, and you're okay with it all. You're accepting it all. Does that make sense? So if we're happy, we're saying, oh, it's got to be good, 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 and we forget there's going to be just as much not good as good, right? Because there's always balance. Do you get that? The universe is always in balance. So the key thing is, have we found what our purpose is? And I had the beautiful pleasure of doing a one-on-one values workshop this last week. And we sat down, and for about an hour and a half, we went through this individual, and we focused, just her and I, on her values. And when we were done, there was a clarity and a light within her that she knew herself better. And because she knew herself better, she was able to share that with the other people in her life. And because she understood that there are basic values that we have a different hierarchy of values. Every human being has that. And when we find that hierarchy, our purpose emerges from that. It doesn't emerge immediately. Just because you know your values, it doesn't emerge immediately, because sometimes we get into this thing where we know our values. We think we know our values. We've even done the workshop and we think we know our values. But the people that have done the workshop, I would ask, how many of you can recite them like this? Because you've got to be able to know the values. They've got to pop off the top of your head like this, because when you know your values, what are you doing? You're asking everything you're about to do, you're saying, does it support my highest values? And if it doesn't support my highest values, you delegate it or you don't do it. You're literally now purposely creating your life. So you've got to ask that decision. And once you start making decisions in alignment with your values, and you start doing those things that are in alignment, what happens is there's an inner calling, an inner inspiration, an inner joy that comes out that shows itself when you're doing certain things. This is me. And when this is me pops up, now you can start to put some verbiage on what is my purpose. But it doesn't come right away. I remember I had my values, and then I was at ceospace.net. I was there and I was talking with the goofiest guy, Kevin. He was one of the instructors. And he was there and he's just very laid back. He's like this type of guy, you know, he's talking. He's not business-like, like I'm not very ministerial-like. He's like that. And we're talking, he goes, so what is it you do? And I said, went through this whole long thing and he says, so let me see, you teach self-love through conscious living. And I went, oh my God. That's where I got the words. In that moment, by trying to express myself with all these other words, some beautiful man came into my life and just mirrored back to me what I said in those few moments. And when it was said, I knew. When you hear your purpose, you know it. And when you know it, you start living it because it's so clear. So let's go on. No one is happy all the time. And the reason for this is that we live in a state of constant contrast where we are dealing with change in every moment. There's change in every moment, no matter how you want to look at it. In this moment, I've just replaced 1 million cells in my body. In this moment, another 1 million cells in my body. Think about it. If you've got over 100 trillion cells in your body, and your body's generally replacing itself every year, some parts 5, 6, 7 times, your body's constantly rebirthing. So when you came in, you are not the same person as when you leave. Your body's really changed itself. So we have to embrace the idea that we're changing all the time. And if we're changing all the time, nothing is constant. Therefore, you're dealing with change. Are you going to be happy all the time dealing with change? I don't think so. I know most of you. You don't like change. Change upsets the apple cart. Change means I have to be different. And we get hunkered down into our little cocoon of conformity. Do you like that? Our cocoon of conformity. Spirit just said not to say what I was thinking. I didn't need to say it, did I? Thank you. So anyway, here's an interesting way of looking at it. The happier we are stimulates us to create a great thought patterns of satisfaction in our subconscious mind. The happier we are, when we're in a state of happiness, we consciously or unconsciously start creating thought patterns of satisfaction in our mind. That's one of the things, why go into a gratitude exercise? Because when you go into a gratitude exercise, you're creating a thought pattern of satisfaction. That's going into your mind. And that pattern's going to play over and over again. It's going to make it easier to deal with things as they arise for us to look at. And so we take it even further. Now I'm quoting the great Raymond Charles Barker. This gentleman is one of the great teachers of religious science. He was with Ernest Holmes. He died, I think, in 1980 at the age of 77. He was one of the most flamboyant speakers in the movement. He had a huge church in New York. His book, where I got this from, The Power of Decision, is one of my top 5 books in the world. So you're going to get a little Raymond today at you. And Raymond goes, once we have a real satisfaction pattern, we live more easily and certainly more prosperously. Not that we will not have problems, but the problems will not get as much of our emotional attention, and thus they will be more easily resolved. You get that? When we have a lot of problems and we get our emotions behind those problems, when we are worrying like crazy, what happens when you worry? That's the biggest emotion you've got. When you're in fear, it's the biggest emotion you've got. You put that behind thoughts. That's prayer demonstrated. That is prayer demonstrated. So when you're worrying about something, know actually that what you're doing is you're praying for it to happen. So we've got to take that and we've got to rewind ourselves back. And when we get to that state where we're uncertain, we've got to shift our thought. We've got to turn away from the condition and go toward what we want. And then it happens. The more you do this, the easier it becomes. It's not something that you're ever going to get a master at. It just becomes easier. So instead of 2 weeks to get over something, it'll be a week. And then it might be a day. Then it might be 2 hours. But think about things. If you once took 2 weeks to get over something, and now you're taking 2 hours, that's tremendous steps. You're not wasting 13 days and what? 22 hours that otherwise would have been wasted in worrying about thinking about nonsense. We can, and I love this. All you empaths out there, read this clearly. We cannot cheer up people who are chronically unhappy. We cannot make someone happy if their subconscious pattern of happiness requires being unhappy. Ooh, that's a mouthful. Think about, can you make someone happy if their subconscious pattern of happiness requires them to be unhappy? And there are many, 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 many people out there that are fed by being unhappy. And then here Raymond Charles sums it all up. We must come to realize that people are the way they are because of their unconscious need for attention. There are people who are unhappy because they get attention being unhappy. There are people who are sick that stay sick because they're getting attention that they're sick. There are people who are not abundant because they get attention by being non-abundant. And why do they need attention? Because they haven't gone within and they haven't done the work to self-love. And when you do the work to self-love, you realize you don't need anyone else's approval for anything other than your own self-approval and self-image. Because remember, you are the infinite expressing itself. The infinite actually chose you to be you. And if the infinite chose you, what more do you need? It's like the whole idea that I was brought up with as a Catholic. The whole idea is brought up that I've got to go to church and worship God. And that just really frosted my tushy. Because this is when I was in the seminary and I was 15 years old, and I said, wait a second. There's this infinite, all-knowing, all-loving God that's always been, always will be, that created everything out of itself, and I'm a child of it, and it needs me to worship it? How desperate is that God? Think about that. How desperate is that? No, that's not God. That's humans thinking God needs it. Because if you go back to the other definition of worship, it means to study. So I can buy into the idea that we study this idea that we call God so that we can better understand our own true nature. And when we better understand our own true nature, we can step into our creative power and create a life of purpose. We create a life of purpose. We create unconscious patterns of thought. We create those unconscious patterns of thought. They in turn put us into a state of happiness. Happiness is found in the satisfaction we feel when we're living our purpose-filled life. It's so interesting. I've had the experience, which I don't have often, the last 2 weeks. My wife's been on a business trip for 4 days, and then she's now up in Denver with our granddaughter. She's been there for 5 days. So I've had time to be with just Lee. Boy, do I love Lee time. I really, really, really love Lee time. And I don't want you to think I don't miss my wife. Does that make sense? I don't want you to think that. But I enjoy being away from her because I get to focus on just me. Saturday for me was just like the greatest day. I could do everything I wanted to do without any thought of having to ask her to do something with me. That's a nice thing. I got to go to the movies by myself. I love going to the movies by myself because I get to see what I want. I don't have to ask, do you want to go see this movie? No, I just go. Was it stupid? Oh, yeah, I went to a stupid movie. I went to the movie, What Do Men Want? So it was a stupid movie. Now, I want you to know if it ever happened that a woman could walk into a room and hear every thought that a man has, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to hell. In that woman's mind, I'm going to hell because that reptilian brain of ours, it goes off in directions that we cannot control. And if you women think that we've got control of the reptilian part of our brains, you're crazy. I thought they could have gone way overboard more than they did in the movie. And it was really fascinating. And then afterwards, I walked out and I met my former massage therapist that I haven't seen in 2.5 years. And she just sort of dropped out of my life. I didn't even know she left, and found out that she's in nursing school and she was about to take her test to become a nurse. And then I got to come home and just be with my son and hang. Now today when I pick up Jean, I'll be very grateful to see her. I'll be present in the moment. And I think what we forget is that no matter where we are, no matter who we're with, we can be present in that moment. And when we're like that, we are love and we are happy. You see, the only way we can be unhappy is if we're worrying about the past or worrying about the future. But if you're centered in the now, it's perfect. Everything is perfect in the now. But we, for some reason, have forgotten that. And we want to bring that past in. We want to bring that past in. We want to anticipate what that future is going to be. Remember, who you are now determines who and what you will experience in the future. Did you just hear what I said? Really reflect on that. Who you are now in this moment will be what you experience in the future. Nothing else can change it but who you are now. So if you choose to want to be happy, there's a science, there's a path to do that. That's all we do at Agape is we teach that. And it starts with meditation. It starts with understanding who you are, what your values are, what your purpose is. It starts with building a daily spiritual practice. It starts living consciously in alignment with what you want. And it's also surrounding yourself with like-minded people. Because in this world today, to be surrounded by like-minded people, it's in reinforcement. It's like a support mechanism that we can use. Because I'm going to tell you something out there. It's crazy. The world out there is crazy. There's more contrast today than at any time that I can imagine because we are bombarded with information at rates faster than ever. And it's up to us to slow it down. What I'm going to say to you is just as simple as it can be. If you want to choose and be happy, know that the power to choose rests with you and only you. And give up anything else other than that. Let's pray. I want to thank you for joining us today. I'm so grateful that you took your time to watch or listen to this message. If you found this message beneficial, I would ask that you go to our website, agapecsl.com. Once there, click on the donate button and experience the joy of conscious and purposeful giving. Or if you would like, text your gift by simply dialing 972-532-6976. It is through your gifts that we are able to bring this message to you in the world. I would ask that if you like this message, to please subscribe to my YouTube channel under my name, Lee Wolak. Again, I want to thank you for joining me in the Agape community as we learn how to better self-love through conscious living.